I want you to think about something for a second. You watered your tomatoes yesterday. You fed them last week. You have been out there checking on them, caring for them, doing everything that every gardening video, every gardening blog, and every well-meaning neighbor told you to do. Now let me ask you something nobody else is going to ask you. What if the advice you were given was wrong? Not slightly wrong. Not just a little off. But dangerously, plant-killingly wrong. Because here is what most people do not know about growing tomatoes in June. The month of June does not reward effort. It does not reward hard work. It does not even reward good intentions. June rewards correct habits. And the gap between a correct habit and a harmful one is sometimes as small as the time of day you water, or the number on the fertilizer bag you grabbed off the shelf at your local garden center. There is a water mold. And yes, I said water mold, not fungus, called Phytophthora infestans. You may not know its name, but gardeners in Ireland in the 1840s knew exactly what it could do. It wiped out an entire country's potato crop and sent millions of people into famine. And that exact same organism is sitting in the soil of backyard gardens right now, all across America, all across the United Kingdom, all across Europe, just waiting for one thing. One wrong watering decision. One evening. One hose held over the top of the plant. That is all it needs. And that is just mistake number 2 on today's list. We are counting down 6 mistakes today, from number 6 all the way down to number 1. And every single one of them is something a well-meaning gardener does regularly, thinking they are helping their plants, thinking they are doing the right thing. By the time we reach number 1, you are going to look at your tomato garden completely differently, and you are going to want to go outside and fix things immediately. Stay with me through this entire video. Every single mistake on this list matters. Missing even one of them could cost you your entire harvest this season. Welcome to Evergreen Garden Life. If you are new here, please take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who grows tomatoes, and hit that subscribe button below. Drop a comment telling us what time you are watching and where you are watching from, whether that is the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, or anywhere else in the world. Mistake number 6. Ignoring blossom drop during peak heat. Let us start with the mistake that confuses and frustrates more gardeners than almost anything else in June. You walk outside, your plant looks incredible. Tall, green, healthy, strong. There are flowers everywhere. And then over the next few days, those flowers just start falling off. One by one. Dry yellow, dropping to the ground before they ever become a tomato. And you panic. Naturally. You start wondering what you did wrong. You feed the plant more. You water it more. You try everything you can think of. And nothing works. The flowers keep dropping. Here is the truth that most gardening content will never tell you plainly. The problem is not your soil. It is not a pest. It is not a disease. The problem is the temperature, and it has a name. It is called blossom drop, and it is a purely physical, biological response that your tomato plant cannot override no matter how healthy it is. Here is how it works. A tomato flower has to pollinate itself to become fruit. Inside that flower, pollen has to be viable, alive, and active for that process to happen. But pollen is extremely sensitive to heat. Once your daytime temperatures climb past roughly 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and your nights stay above 70 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, that pollen becomes completely non-viable. It goes sticky, inactive, and dead. The flower has nothing to work with, so the plant makes a biological decision to cut its losses. It drops the flower and conserves its energy. The Alabama Cooperative Extension System has confirmed this threshold directly, linking blossom drop to daytime temperatures above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, combined with nighttime temperatures above 72 degrees. Oklahoma State University Extension puts the daytime ceiling at around 92 degrees Fahrenheit before drop becomes almost inevitable. And the University of Illinois Extension confirms that tomatoes consistently drop blossoms when summer days push above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So what do you actually do about it? First, invest in a 30 to 40% shade cloth and drape it over your plants during the hottest part of the afternoon, particularly on the west and south-facing sides where that brutal late-day sun hits hardest. Purdue University Extension and West Virginia University Extension both recommend shade cloth in the 30 to 50% range, specifically to reduce heat stress and cut blossom drop. You are not trying to block all sunlight. You are just taking the edge off those peak afternoon hours. Raise it up on stakes or hoops so air can still circulate underneath. Let the morning sun reach the plant freely. Second, keep your watering completely consistent during heat waves because a plant that is heat-stressed and dehydrated at the same time simply gives up. And third, when you are planning for next season, look specifically for heat-set tomato varieties. Varieties like Solar Fire, Heatmaster, and Florida 91 were developed specifically to keep setting fruit in high heat conditions. The Alabama Cooperative Extension System credits these heat-set varieties with continuing to fruit even when ordinary varieties have completely shut down. If you garden anywhere across the American South, the lower mountain states, or regions in southern Europe where 90-plus-degree afternoons are simply a normal part of June, these varieties are not optional. They are essential. The freedom that comes with understanding blossom drop is enormous. Once you know it is a temperature issue and not a personal failure, you stop overfeeding a plant that does not need it, you stop second-guessing every decision you made, and you simply manage the heat and wait for conditions to improve. The plant will set fruit again the moment those night temperatures drop back below 72 degrees. Patience and shade cloth. That is your answer for mistake number 6. Mistake number 5. Pruning too much or not pruning at all. Here is one of the most divided topics in all of home gardening. And the reason it is on this list is because both extremes, doing too much and doing nothing at all, cause serious damage in June. And most gardeners land firmly on one extreme or the other without realizing there is a middle ground that protects both the plant and the harvest. Let us start with the gardeners who never prune. If you are growing indeterminate tomatoes, the tall vining varieties that keep growing and producing all season long, leaving them completely unpruned through June is one of the quietest ways to invite disaster. Here is why. Tomato plants constantly push out new growth called suckers. These are the shoots that emerge in the V-shaped junction between the main stem and a branch. Left alone, every single sucker becomes a full branch. And every branch pushes out more suckers. Within weeks, you have a tangled, dense, overgrown thicket of stems and leaves so thick that air cannot move through it. And that is where the problem begins. After rain, after morning dew, after evening humidity, the inside of that plant stays wet for hours. That trapped moisture sitting against the leaves is an open invitation to every fungal disease and water mold that targets tomatoes. Michigan State University Extension has confirmed that removing suckers leads to better air circulation, earlier ripening, larger individual fruit, and significantly fewer disease problems throughout the season. The University of California Master Gardener program backs this up specifically for indeterminate varieties. The technique itself is simple. When a sucker is small, between 1 and 2 inches long, you can pinch it off cleanly with your fingers right at the base of the V. Stay on top of it once a week and it takes about 5 minutes per plant. Always wipe your fingers or your pruning shears with 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol between plants so you are not accidentally transferring disease from one plant to another on your own hands or blades. Now if you have missed a few weeks and some of those suckers have grown into thick shoots with multiple sets of leaves, do not tear the whole thing out at once. That kind of aggressive removal shocks the plant. And it also suddenly exposes fruit that was shaded to direct harsh sunlight. Instead, use what experienced growers call Missouri pruning. Take clean shears and clip just the growing tip off the oversized sucker, leaving the bottom 2 sets of leaves attached. That stops the sucker from growing further and stealing energy, while keeping those lower leaves to shade the developing fruit, and continue feeding the plant through photosynthesis. Now here is the honest side of this that you deserve to hear. Pruning is not for every tomato plant. If you are growing determinate varieties, the compact bushy types bred to set one concentrated crop and stop, do not heavily prune them. You will cut into the very growth that carries your harvest. Check your plant tag or seed packet if you are unsure which type you have. And regardless of variety, never strip so many leaves that you expose the fruit to direct sun. The University of Georgia Extension and Iowa State University both warn specifically about sun scald, which shows up as pale, leathery, sunburned patches on the fruit that eventually rot. The leaves are the plant's umbrella. Prune for airflow, but leave enough canopy to do its job. Mistake number 4. Feeding your tomatoes heavy nitrogen all season long. This mistake feels like love. It genuinely does. You want big, strong, healthy tomato plants, so you reach for the all-purpose plant fertilizer, the kind with the big numbers on the front. And you feed your plants generously all the way through summer. And the plant responds beautifully. It grows lush, dark green, enormous. It looks incredible. The neighbors walk past and comment on how healthy your garden looks. And then August arrives and you have almost no tomatoes to show for it. This is one of the most heartbreaking outcomes in home gardening, because the gardener did everything with good intentions, and the plant looked perfect the entire time. So what went wrong? Nitrogen is the nutrient that drives leaf and stem growth. When you keep feeding high nitrogen to a tomato plant through June and into summer, you are essentially telling that plant to keep making green tissue. And it listens. It pours every bit of its available energy into foliage because that is the signal you keep sending. But fruit does not run on nitrogen. Flowering and fruiting are driven primarily by phosphorus, which is the middle number on any fertilizer bag, and by potassium, which is the third number, responsible for sizing up and ripening the fruit. A plant that is flooded with nitrogen and receiving weak signals on phosphorus and potassium will keep postponing fruit production. It will keep making leaves. You have essentially grown a very large, very beautiful houseplant that happens to technically be a tomato. Oklahoma State University Extension specifically recommends moving toward a low nitrogen, higher phosphorus blend for tomatoes by the time summer arrives. Something like a May 10th, 10 or October 20th, 10 fertilizer, where that elevated middle number is driving flowering rather than foliage. You can find these blends at any Home Depot, Lowe's, or independent garden center across America and the United Kingdom. Side dress it lightly around the plant once fruit begins to set, keeping it a few inches away from the main stem to avoid burning the roots. If you prefer a more natural approach, work several inches of fully finished compost into your bed before transplanting. Compost releases nutrients slowly and steadily across the whole season, feeding the plant without ever spiking nitrogen the way a heavy synthetic dose does. It is one of the most forgiving, balanced things you can do for a tomato bed. There is also a secondary consequence to nitrogen overfeeding that the North Carolina Cooperative Extension has specifically flagged, and it is a painful one. An overdose of high nitrogen fertilizer can actually trigger flowers to drop straight off the plant. So the very thing you thought was building toward a harvest is costing you that harvest twice over. Once by pushing energy into leaves instead of fruit, and again by dropping the flowers that would have become tomatoes. Back off the nitrogen. Switch to a fruit-forward fertilizer. Your plants will thank you in August. Mistake number 3. Ignoring your regional climate and soil type. This is the mistake that almost no gardening video talks about, and it is responsible for so much quiet, unnecessary failure across home gardens in America, the United Kingdom, and Europe every single June. Because here is the reality. Gardening advice is not one size fits all. It never has been. And blindly following general advice without accounting for where you actually live and what your soil actually does is one of the most underrated mistakes you can make. Think about this for a moment. A gardener in Zone 5 in Minnesota and a gardener in Zone 9 in Texas are both growing tomatoes in June. But those two gardeners are fighting completely different battles. The Minnesota gardener is working with cooler nights, potentially heavy clay soil that holds moisture for longer, and a shorter growing window that makes every week precious. The Texas gardener is dealing with intense heat accumulation, sandy or fast-draining soil that loses moisture quickly, extreme blossom drop risk, and disease pressure that runs at a completely different pace. If both of those gardeners follow the exact same watering schedule from the same YouTube video, one of them is going to overwater and suffocate their roots. The other is going to underwater and stress their plants into blossom drop and blossom end rot. Same advice. Two completely different outcomes. This is why the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone system exists. Not just to tell you what plants survive your winters, but to help you understand the fundamental climate conditions your garden operates in every single season. The University of Maryland Extension directly ties inconsistent root moisture to regional soil type, explaining that gardeners on fast-draining sandy soils, common across much of the American South and coastal regions of the United Kingdom, need to water more frequently to maintain that steady moisture level. Gardeners on the heavy clay soils found across much of the Midwest and parts of Northern Europe need to water less often, Allow water to soak in slowly and deeply, and be much more careful about waterlogging the root zone. So before you follow any watering schedule, any feeding schedule, or any pruning timeline you find online, ask yourself one question. Does this advice come from someone gardening in a climate like mine? If the answer is no, adjust it. Learn your soil. Push your finger 2 inches into the ground before you water. If it is damp at that depth, wait. If it is dry, water deeply. That simple test, repeated consistently, is worth more than any generic schedule you will ever find. Your garden is in your climate. Manage it accordingly. Mistake number 2. Watering over the leaves, especially in the evening. We have arrived at the mistake that is directly responsible for the most dramatic and devastating plant losses in June. And the reason it is so devastating is because it feels like exactly the right thing to do. After a long, hot day, you walk out to your garden in the evening. You see your tomato plants looking a little tired in the heat, and you give them a good soaking from above, over the leaves, down the stems, all the way to the soil. It feels generous. It feels caring. It feels like exactly what those plants need after a hard day in the sun. It is the single most dangerous watering habit in this entire video. Here is what is actually happening when you do this. Tomatoes are vulnerable to a group of diseases that spread in a very specific way. Early blight, septoria leaf spot, and most dangerously late blight, all have spores that live in the soil and on old plant debris around the base of your plants. When you blast water from above, or even when you water hard at the base and the soil splashes upward, you are physically launching those spores from the ground onto the lower leaves of your plant. Iowa State University states this directly. These disease spores spread to new leaves through splashing rain and overhead watering. Once a spore lands on a leaf, it needs one single thing to germinate and break into the plant tissue: moisture. A leaf that stays wet long enough for the spore to activate. And what does evening overhead watering do better than anything else? It leaves every leaf on that plant soaking wet for the entire night. Hours and hours of darkness, humidity, and wet foliage. That is not a garden. That is a disease incubator. Early blight will show up first as dark brown spots with concentric rings inside them, like a tiny bullseye, starting on the lowest leaves and climbing steadily upward. Septoria leaf spot looks like scattered small spots with pale gray centers and dark edges. Both of these will defoliate your plant from the bottom up and ruin your season if left unchecked. But late blight is in a completely different category of destruction. It is not even a true fungus. It is a water mold, Phytophthora infestans, the same organism that caused the Irish potato famine across Europe in the 1840s. And it does not politely start at the bottom and work its way up. It can hit anywhere on the plant all at once, and it moves with terrifying speed. The University of Florida has confirmed it can destroy a tomato plant within days. A plant that was covered in green fruit and standing 6 feet tall can be a brown, collapsed skeleton in under 2 weeks. That is not an exaggeration. That is what late blight does when you give it the conditions it needs. And evening overhead watering gives it everything. So here is the fix. And it is genuinely simple once you commit to it. Stop watering from above completely. Water at the soil level, at the base of the plant, never on the leaves. Switch to a soaker hose or a basic drip line. You can find these at any hardware store across America or the United Kingdom for as little than $15 to $20, and you lay them right on the soil under the plant. Cornell University specifically recommends drip irrigation over overhead watering for tomatoes for exactly this reason. If you must water by hand, do it in the morning, not the evening, so that any accidental splash on the leaves has hours of sunlight to dry it off before nightfall. Lay 2 to 3 inches of straw mulch over the soil around your plants as a physical barrier to stop soil from splashing upward onto the lower leaves when you water. Strip off every leaf on the plant that sits within 6 to 8 inches of the ground, since those are the first ones to get infected through soil contact. And wipe your pruning shears with rubbing alcohol between every single plant every single time you cut. Walk your plants every couple of days and inspect those lower leaves. Catch these diseases early and you can pull the affected leaves off, bag them immediately, and put them in the rubbish bin, never the compost pile, because composting infected leaves just preserves the disease for next year. If you ever see the irregular water-soaked patches with a pale halo and a whitish fuzz on the underside of a leaf that signals late blight, Act that same day. With late blight, every hour matters. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment to do it. Think about it this way. You just learned that a single watering habit, one you probably thought was kind and generous, can destroy a healthy plant in under 2 weeks. If you leave without subscribing, next week's video goes to everyone else's feed but yours. The gardener down the road who subscribes today will know things about their garden that you will not. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Do not let that happen. Mistake number 1. Inconsistent watering that starves your fruit of calcium. We have made it to number 1. And I want you to pay very close attention here, because this is the mistake that destroys harvests silently, slowly, and weeks before most gardeners even realize something has gone wrong. You walk out to your garden one morning, and you find it. A tomato that looked perfectly healthy from the top, sitting on a plant that still looks fine, but when you turn that fruit over, the bottom is dark, sunken, leathery, like something pressed a hot iron into the skin, and the flesh beneath just collapsed. You might assume it is a disease. You might assume the soil is missing something. You might go online and find dozens of videos telling you to add calcium to your soil, pour in crushed eggshells, dissolve antacid tablets around the roots. And almost none of that will help. Because blossom end rot, which is what you are looking at, is not a disease. It is not caused by a pest. And in the vast majority of home gardens across America, the United Kingdom, and Europe, it is not even caused by a lack of calcium in the soil. The University of Illinois Extension classifies blossom end rot as a physiological disorder, not a pathogen. The University of Maryland Extension ties it directly and specifically to inconsistent watering and drought stress. Here is the biology, and once you understand this, you will never make this mistake again. Calcium does not move freely around inside a tomato plant on its own. It travels with water. It is pulled up through the root system and delivered to the developing fruit as the plant drinks. When you water deeply on Monday, forget Tuesday and Wednesday, give it a light splash on Thursday, and then soak it again on Saturday, you are repeatedly interrupting that calcium delivery system. And the place inside the fruit that suffers most is the blossom end, the bottom of the tomato, the part farthest from the stem, the part that is growing the fastest and therefore has the highest demand for that steady calcium supply. The cells at the blossom end collapse. They die. The tissue darkens and sinks. And your soil can be absolutely full of calcium the entire time, because the problem was never the supply. It was the delivery. The calcium was there. The water to carry it consistently was not. This is why dumping eggshells into the planting hole, or adding calcium spray to the leaves, or dissolving antacid tablets around the base of the plant usually does absolutely nothing for blossom end rot in a garden that already has reasonable soil. You are solving the wrong problem. The real fix is water consistency. And here is exactly how to achieve it. Give your tomatoes 1 to 2 inches of water per week, delivered in 1 or 2 long, deep thorough soakings rather than a daily surface sprinkle. A daily light watering only wets the top inch of soil. The roots stay shallow because they have no reason to go deeper. And a shallow-rooted plant panics and stresses the moment that top inch of soil dries out in the summer heat. Deep, infrequent watering does the opposite. It trains the roots to push down into the soil where moisture is stable, where a hot week above ground barely affects them. Lay 2 to 3 inches of straw or shredded leaf mulch over the soil surface around every plant to hold that moisture steady between waterings and reduce surface evaporation. Before you water each time, push your finger 2 inches down into the soil next to the plant. If it is still damp at that depth, wait. If it is dry at that depth, water deeply and thoroughly. That simple finger test, done consistently, will tell you more about what your plant actually needs than any moisture meter on the market. If you garden on the sandy soils common across the American South or the coastal areas of the United Kingdom, your soil drains fast, and you may need to water slightly more frequently to maintain that consistent moisture. If you are on the heavy clay soils of the Midwest or parts of Northern Europe, your soil holds moisture longer and you water less often, allowing it to absorb slowly and deeply each time. The goal is always the same regardless of your soil type. Steady, consistent moisture. Never a drought followed by a flood. Get this one thing right, and you do not just stop blossom end rot. You also stop your tomatoes from cracking and splitting open overnight after a heavy rain, which is the other heartbreak of a summer garden. That happens for the same reason. Inconsistent moisture followed by a sudden flood of water causes the fruit to expand too rapidly and burst. Consistency eliminates both problems at once. And that is all 6 mistakes. Let me pull them together for you quickly because they are not really 6 separate random rules. They connect to each other in a way that once you see it, makes the whole summer make sense. Mistake 6 is about heat management. Understanding that blossom drop is a temperature response, not a personal failure, and managing it with shade cloth and the right varieties. Mistake 5 is about airflow. Pruning indeterminate tomatoes with balance and intention so the plant breathes, dries quickly, and directs energy toward fruit instead of endless foliage. Mistake 4 is about restraint in feeding. Recognizing that more nitrogen means more leaves, not more tomatoes, and switching to a phosphorus-forward fertilizer when fruit is setting. Mistake 3 is about knowing your own garden. Understanding that regional climate and soil type change everything about how you water, how often you feed, and how you manage disease pressure. Mistake 2 is about where and when your water lands. Keeping it at the soil level, in the morning, with mulch as a barrier, so that the most destructive plant diseases never get the wet leaves they need to take hold. And mistake 1 is about consistency above everything else. Delivering water steadily, deeply, and reliably so that calcium reaches the developing fruit every single day without interruption. Water, feeding, airflow, heat management, regional awareness, consistency. Get those 6 things right in June and your tomato plants carry you all the way to a full, heavy, beautiful August harvest. Get even one of them wrong in June, and you may spend July watching a problem that could have been prevented in 30 seconds. June is the hinge the whole tomato season swings on. And now you know exactly how to handle it. If this video helped you today, do not just close it and move on. Share it. Right now, think of one person you know whose tomatoes never seem to make it through the summer. A neighbor, a family member, a friend in a gardening group. Send them this video. You might be the reason they finally have a real harvest this year. That matters more than you might think. And if you are still watching this without having subscribed, I want you to sit with that for a second. You just spent time going through all 6 of these mistakes. You now know things about tomato growing in June that most gardeners across America, the United Kingdom, and Europe will never find out. You have the information. The question is whether you will be here next week when we go just as deep into the next topic. Subscribing takes 1 second. Not subscribing means this channel disappears from your feed, and next week's video, which might be the one that solves the next problem in your garden, goes to everyone else but you. Hit subscribe. Turn on the bell. You have already proven you belong here. Go check your plants. Water at the base. Water in the morning. And we will see you in the next one.